Howdy folks, hope you've all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. It's been a pretty good weekend for me. On Saturday night I finally put the finishing touches to the M3 Lee diorama I've been trying to get finished for what feels like weeks now. And I was pretty pleased with it. I mean, it's a little rough around the edges, but there's a lot of stuff going on here that I'd never tried to do before. I've never made a diorama. I've never tried to apply static grass. There's all kinds of stuff going on here that is a first time experience for me, and I thought it was all right. I was quite proud of myself. And then the very next day, on Sunday, I went down to the Tank Museum at Bovington to see the Southwest Model Show. And then I saw what other people were making. Well, shit. So yeah, that very quickly put me in my place. Still, got to look on the bright side. Gives me something to aim at, I suppose. I had a really good day. Bumped into a couple of you guys there as well, who were very surprised to see me at the Tank Museum. I mean, I didn't advertise that I was going, but I didn't even know the Southwest Model Show was on until 2 days before when I got an email from the Tank Museum advertising it. So it was almost as much of a surprise for me as it was for anybody that I bumped into when I was down there. What came as a very pleasant surprise was my old mate Nick. Nick was British Army. Joined as a signalman, did P Company, earned his Maroon Beret, served with the Parachute Regiment, and is now retired, and in addition to his many other talents, works with a charity group called Models for Heroes. They're a charity organisation who use model making to aid veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress to come to terms with their emotions and give them something to do to calm them, focus them, and put them into contact with other veterans who have similar issues, who are also using model making and model painting as a form of therapy. So, link down below in the video description to their website if you feel like donating, or maybe you know somebody who might benefit from their help. But it was great to see Nick again. I haven't seen him since we were both serving together at Royal Hospital Haslar in Gosport, and that must be 13 years ago. But it was great to get back in touch. And the boy's got some skills too. Check this out. Every one of these vehicles, from the Fox armoured car at the front all the way to the Chieftain main battle tank at the back, Nick has either served in, owns, or at the very least has had a go in one of them. Spoiler, he owns the Fox armoured car. This thing will do 70 miles per hour. That's miles per hour, not kilometres per hour. It will do well over 100 kilometres per hour. It's a 7-ton vehicle, 3 tons of which are in the turret. It's a little bit top heavy. It's definitely not recommended you try to pull any tight corners when you're doing 70 miles per hour in this thing. It's got a habit of flipping over, which is kind of worrying because Nick doesn't have much luck with vehicles. The last large vehicle he owned was a biplane, and he crashed it, so... and we never let him forget it. But he doesn't just build models for display. All of his models are also radio controlled. Is there no end to this boy's talents? The Jeep with the 2 paratroopers, well, one of them's a paratrooper that you can see at the bottom of the screen there. That's his too. And he's got the real thing. You see, boys never really grow up. Their toys just get more expensive. So it was great to see Nick again. And I had a really good day at the Southwest Model Show in general. More pictures to follow of some of the amazing stuff that was on display. So, anyway, I got a very interesting phone call last week. Out of nowhere, the phone rings. I pick it up, and apparently somebody thinks I may have been involved in a car accident that wasn't my fault. I have to admit, I was very surprised, because I don't have a car, and I don't even have a driving license. So, if I ever get involved in a car accident, I can guarantee you it's going to be my fault, because I'll have stolen it and I'll be driving it without a license. So, anyway, I just did the usual thing and I hung up immediately. I didn't even bother answering them and blocked the number. But that never really seems to work for long, because I seem to get this phone call every week. And it led me to start wondering, who exactly falls for this shit? I mean, it must be working, otherwise they wouldn't keep doing it. So I decided to investigate, and I turned to Google to find out exactly what the point of this whole thing is. It turns out that this isn't exactly a scam, but it's an extremely devious way of drumming up business for ambulance chasers. Yeah, the old personal claims lawyers. Notice how they always start the conversation. We hear that you may have been involved in an accident that wasn't your fault. I mean, I haven't, but it's true that I may have been. It just turns out that I haven't. But that gets people thinking. Was I involved? Oh yeah, actually I was. And at that point, of course, they stop chasing after the fictional accident that they made up on the spot and start asking you questions about any accidents that you admit to them. And thus they find out whether or not they can make a claim, and so on and so on and so on. But it's really annoying having my phone going off at least once a week by one of these arseholes, starting the conversation by blatantly lying to me, and then trying to dig around to see if there's a way they can make a fast buck out of me. And just hanging up and blocking their number doesn't seem to work because I keep getting called every week. But while I was busy on Google trying to find out just exactly what was going on with the whole situation, I came across something that I had no idea existed and is absolutely amazing. Or at least it is if you live in the UK. You see, and I didn't know this, but I do now, we have this thing called the Telephone Preference Service, the TPS. It's one of those services that the government provides just enough money to fund, but not enough money to advertise, so, well, hardly anybody knows about it. And it's really, really simple. You go to the TPS website, which, if you're in the UK, is tpsonline.org.uk, and you register your phone numbers with them. At that point, anybody who uses any of your registered phone numbers to try to hit you with unsolicited sales or marketing calls is breaking the law. Well, I say at that point. You're supposed to give 28 days to ensure that your registered phone numbers are filtered through. But if after 28 days of registering your phone numbers with the TPS and you continue to receive unsolicited marketing phone calls, you can report them to the Information Commissioner's office and they will be in the shit. And of course, telemarketing companies don't like being in the shit because it tends to get very expensive for them, so they have to comply. With the Information Commissioner's Office Guide to Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations. And one of those regulations is, you must not make marketing calls to any number listed on the Telephone Preference Service or Corporate Telephone Preference Service unless that person has specifically consented to your calls. So, you need to screen call lists against the Telephone Preference Service database. So if you've registered your phone number with the Telephone Preference Service, and if after 28 days you are still getting unsolicited marketing calls, report them to the Office of the Information Commissioner, and they will get done. Now, I don't know if this kind of government service is available in whatever country you happen to live in, but up until 3 days ago I didn't know that this service existed in the UK, and it does. And it didn't take a great deal of effort for me to find it, and completing the registration process took about 2 minutes. So if you live in the UK, I highly recommend you take advantage of the TPS service, tpsonline.org.uk. If you don't live in the UK, I highly recommend you find out whether or not this kind of service exists in your country of residence too. Next up, I got an email this week. Well, I got a lot of emails this week, but this one in particular I wanted to address. This is from Brian Cox. He supplied his in-game name, but I'm not going to make that public. His message is this. Hi Jingles. First, I'm sorry, but this is not a business email. He sent this to my business email address, which is fine. But I need to talk to you. In a nutshell, I play World of Warships, and I am but a modest player. I get very toxic messages in and out of the game. The reason for this email is I'm on the verge of deleting my wargaming account as I find the players in World of Warships so toxic. Hardly a game goes by without insults and after-game abuse. Even though I do my best, I play for fun, but too many are making this game unplayable for me. And it'd be a big loss if I deleted my account. Can you please advise me on what to do, as I'm a key press away from deleting the game for good. I don't want to, but the abuse is a bit much. Any advice would be of help, please. Again, I'm sorry for using your business email, but couldn't think of another way. I hope you can forgive me. Thanks. Okay, Brian, absolutely you're forgiven. Don't worry about it. So I've been going over Brian's stats, which I can do and you can't because I know his in-game name and you don't. And his win rate is pretty bad. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but it's definitely not good. But his win rate is more a reflection of how bad he was when he first started playing the game than how terrible he is currently. There are definite signs of improvement there. But his overall win rate isn't really that much worse than what I'd expect to see of somebody with the number of games played that he has. So this part of today's video goes out to everybody who thinks it's cool to yell abuse in-game at people with so few battles played, and in particular send them private messages to yell further abuse at them when they're out of battle. Grow the fuck up. Yes, Brian is pretty bad at the game. His win rate is... it's not the worst I've ever seen, but it's definitely not good. But he's a newbie. What do you expect? And how is yelling at people going to make them any better? I understand your frustration. We've all been there. It's okay to be frustrated at your team when they somehow manage to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I feel it myself, and I have a good swearing session at the monitor, but that's as far as it goes. Because not only is sending hate messages to people via the private message system against the terms of service and could get your account suspended, but it doesn't improve the situation. It might make you feel marginally better after you've vented your frustration at some poor noob who doesn't actually know any better, but it doesn't make them play the game any better. And by the way, Brian is getting better, despite the attitude of people that think he doesn't deserve to be playing the game. Again, I've had a look at his stats, and his best game played, despite his overall 47% win rating, which is pretty bad, it's not terrible, but it's definitely not good. But despite that overall win rating, which is a reflection of when he first started playing, which wasn't that long ago, and he really had no idea what he was doing, but to date, his best game played is 3,500 base experience, which is pretty incredible. 230,000 damage, 6 kills and 52 aircraft shot down. So he is getting better, and he's getting better despite the abuse thrown at him by toxic players, not because of it. This next part's for Brian specifically. Well, Brian and anybody else who's in the same situation. While it's tempting to just say, Brian, you need to harden the fuck up, mate, that doesn't really help. It's obviously bothering you to the extent that you're considering deleting the game, which would be a shame because you clearly enjoy playing it, or would if it wasn't for the abuse that you receive while you're playing it. So I have 3 pieces of advice for you. 1 to help in the short term, and 2 to help in the long term. Short-term advice first. If you're getting bothered that much by messages in battle chat, you can turn it off. Pull up the game settings, look for the controls tab, it's the 3rd one along, and then look at the bottom of the screen, and there's a tick box marked battle chat. Untick it, and you will no longer see messages from anybody in battle chat. Unfortunately, there's still nothing that you can do about disabling private messages other than adding people to your blacklist after they've already PM'd you. But you can at least disable battle chat. Now, I wouldn't really recommend it unless it's seriously getting to you, because there's often a lot of very useful information. Well, I say often. Sometimes there's actually some useful information in battle chat from your teammates who aren't yelling abuse at everybody. And with battle chat turned off, you're not going to see it, but it's up to you. The choice is yours. Now, long-term solutions to your problems. First, I note that you mostly play battleships. In fact, just over 90% of your games are played in battleships. Play something else. You clearly enjoy playing battleships, but you're also clearly not yet quite that good at it, and I think it's likely that one of the reasons is because you only play battleships, so you only ever really see things from a battleship player's perspective. Try playing destroyers and cruisers. The reason I say this, and we're going to go back to when I first started playing World of Tanks, all I wanted was to have a Tiger, so I immediately started down the German tech tree, and eventually got to tier 7, unlocked the Tiger, and Oh my god, it was terrible. Stock Tiger is just awful. But I persevered, and I unlocked all of the modules for the Tiger. And I still sucked in it. I kept getting killed by the Russian Tier 7 Heavy, the IS. And I thought, it's just because the IS is a clearly superior tank. Russian bias, and so on and so on and so on. So I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. And I started grinding down the Russian heavy tank line until I got the IS. I thought, right, now we'll see who's boss. And I kept getting killed by people in Tigers. And it was at that point that I thought, maybe it's not the tank. Right? That was the turning point for me, when I realised that it wasn't the tank, it was probably me. And I started playing all other kinds of tanks to figure out what they were good at, what they were bad at, what they could do, what they were afraid of, and that helped me in my Tiger and my IS by knowing how light tanks played, by understanding what was a dangerous situation for a heavy tank to be in. I'm sure you get the idea. It's the same in World of Warships. If you're constantly getting sunk and torpedoed by destroyers or DPM'd and burned down by cruisers, try playing destroyers, try playing cruisers. See how difficult it is for them, or how easy it is for them, to sink battleships. And with that experience, you'll be a better battleship player. And if you are a better battleship player, not only will you enjoy the game more, but you won't get yelled at as much. I'm not going to say you won't get yelled at, because there are always going to be arseholes, but you'll definitely get yelled at less. And you'll be enjoying the game more, because you'll be winning more, and you'll be doing better even if you aren't winning. Now, the second piece of long-term advice that I would give you is to spend some time on Twitch, watching people who are very good at World of Warships, and who also explain what they're doing and why they're doing it. In particular, I realise this is going to be a controversial choice, but I'd like to recommend Flamu. You probably know who he is if you're a World of Warships player, and he does have something of a reputation of being a bit toxic, but seriously, his reputation, while he can be a bit toxic, his reputation is far overblown. But one of the things that he does do, which is incredibly useful to new players, is every now and then he does this thing called replay analysis. This is where he takes some of the replays that people send him, and he watches them with his audience live on stream, and points out what it is that you're doing wrong, and explains why it's a bad idea. And he doesn't do it to poke fun and laugh at people. He does it to help the people that send the replays in improve, so that they can understand why their choices weren't the best choices. And it'll probably come as something of a surprise to a lot of people who know Flamu by reputation alone, but when he's looking at these replays, and they're usually the mediocre replays, he doesn't tolerate anybody in stream chat giving the player shit for their poor play, because that's not what it's for. Because it takes some balls to send in a replay for Flamu to critique live on his stream with, 2,000 to 3,000 people watching. Especially when you know it's not your best performance. In fact, it's usually a bad performance. That's the whole reason why people send these replays in particular when he's doing replay analysis. So they can benefit from his advice. It's actually a very, very useful thing that he does. I've learned a couple of things from watching them. That's why he's one of my favourite World of Warships live streamers, despite his reputation. And he really does make a lot of the whole most toxic live streamer in World of Warships thing. I mean, he loses his temper every now and then. Well, actually, he loses his temper quite a lot. If we're going to be completely honest. But he's not as bad as his reputation would have people believe. And even if he's not commentating, that is a word. I had to stop and think there for a second. Come on, Jingles, it's your language. Stop being so bad at it. But even if he's not doing a commentary and offering advice and pointing out what you did wrong and what you did right and the things that he likes you doing, on your replay in particular, you can still learn an awful lot from when he does replay analysis of other people's replays, because we all make the same mistakes. So that would be my advice to you. Turn off battle chat if you absolutely must. Don't just play battleships all the time. and watch live streams of people who are very good at the game, and also explain what they're doing and why they're doing it as they're doing it, because you can learn a lot from that too. And I hope this has been of help, not just to you, Brian, but also to anybody else who's in the same situation. Anyway, it's been a really long day for me, so that is going to be it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I just want to finish with some top secret documentary footage that recently came into my possession of a Spartan infantry fighting vehicle undertaking a rehearsal run around the arena at the Tank Museum in Bovington in preparation for Tankfest 2020. Enjoy the clip, take care, and I'll catch you next time.